I want to help him reestablish some sort of a different, route for him to go in terms of his career and whatnot. And so I had him on my podcast, and it didn't go the way I wanted it to go.
It didn't seem to me personally that there was a bunch of reflection done.
Did you see Carlos Mencia on Bobby Lee's show? It is riveting. I called Bobby when I got done with it.
I have to say, in terms of uncomfortable podcasts I've done in my life, right? Yeah. That rivaled the Carlos Mencia one.
Ooh.
The Carlos Mencia one was, for me, very uncomfortable.
With over 2.1 million views in only 8 months, the TigerBelly episode with Brendan Schaub is quickly becoming their most viewed and controversial episode on their channel. And although the entire situation, the drama was pretty wild, it does not top the very uncomfortable and legendary episode with Carlos Mencia. In this video, you will see Bobby Lee actually talking to Carlos Mencia about his massive downfall. He gives him an opportunity to apologize and come clean. And after 50 minutes of just a tough conversation and uncomfortable moments, Bobby Lee is left no choice but to actually call him out for the joke stealing. It was definitely a tough watch, especially if you're a longtime comedy fan and if you know the entire drama that happened between Bobby Lee, Carlos Mencia, and Joe Rogan back in like 2008.
So how are you feeling now with all this, the controversy that happened a decade ago? I mean, what's going on now?
14 years ago now.
14 years ago, yeah.
I realized, like, my absence from the internet in all those years allowed a narrative to be created that will never change. So my biggest regret is back in those days, when all this stuff happened, was to fight it. Not fight it, but to, like, I've recorded all my shows since 1993. I don't have to fight anybody on anything. If somebody comes up to me and says, hey, you're doing my joke, I could easily go, what joke is it? When did you tell it? Let me go look. And then if you did it before me, I'll stop doing it or whatever it is. Like, I've always had that.
Yeah.
But
both Bobby and Kalila quickly realized that Carlos Mencia is not going to be apologizing, and instead he is about to start denying everything. So they know that it's about to be a very tough conversation ahead, because Carlos Mencia begins the conversation by saying something pretty wild, essentially saying that him staying quiet and not addressing the accusations in the past was his biggest mistake and his biggest regret, which is false. There is clearly a video of him actually trying to address the accusations in the worst way possible by doubling down.
Listen to me and look at me when I tell you this with all honesty. If you think that I steal jokes, yeah, you're right. Of course I steal jokes. Are you out of your mind? When I come to a comedy club, you better run. You better get the off stage, because if anything you say is even remotely funny, I'm gonna make it mine, and all I'm gonna do is say Mexican in the front. I'm like a rapper.
Whatever it is, and no matter what I say,
But why not?
skip.
But Ned, why not do in the beginning just a blanket apology?
But
and
I
then
wasn't.
move on?
See, let me get this. Understand what happened. Anytime, even to this day, bro.
Yeah.
Somebody says you stole a joke, I go, okay, well, what joke was it? Not angry. Like, what joke, dude? I write a lot.
I have seen that, but I've also seen some of your act, you know what I mean, a little too close to things that have already been established, like the Bill Cosby bit.
Yeah, I'd never seen that once.
Plus, he's had so many years, a very long time to actually think about what he would say in a situation like a podcast with Bobby Lee, who actually knows him. And if back then he would have said the things that he is saying in that podcast, it would have been very bad for him, because there is clearly, or at least back then, there was clearly a lot of people that could have easily disproven what he was saying and came out and exposed him. More people than just Joe Rogan. However, because it's been so long now, none of those comedians are actually going to go out of their way to make a video calling out Mencia or trying to correct him and expose him for what he said on TigerBelly, except for Brendan Schaub, who actually brought up that episode to Joe Rogan on a Joe Rogan Experience podcast.
Speaking of stealing, did you see Carlos Mencia on Bobby Lee's show?
I did not.
It is riveting. I called Bobby when I got done with it, because I wasn't around the Comedy Store in comedy when that was going down, when you guys had the
I
issue.
saw that he was on it, and I watched like a few seconds of it, but I was like, oof.
It's pretty entertaining because and Bobby, you know, he goes at him, man. It's like you definitely stole some stuff, man, and like you need to apologize for it. You know, Carlos is like the problem is like I'm not on the internet. I'm not on social media really.
Of course
So
he is.
well, he's saying like he doesn't really have a voice on there.
It's
So
an Instagram page.
yeah, but not you know he's not doing it. You know he's
It's on
older.
it all the time.
Yeah.
No, I mean he's come up with a bunch of different versions of why he is not at fault.
And Joe, I'm not
Yeah.
I'm not
No, I
defending
know
him at
you're
all.
not.
I'm just
I know
saying
you're
it was super interesting because I only know you know your version, Ari's version. Bobby Lee tells me
Yeah.
about all these stories. I've heard all these stories. I've never had any interaction
He's
with
got
him.
a few different versions. One of
Yeah.
his versions is I've recorded all my shows since 1993, and if I ever stole a joke, I would go back and say, "Listen, I could show you that I did it before you," or if I did, I'm sorry. Like, he's trying to find a way to excuse what everybody
behavior.
knows he did. What he was doing was copying other people's material, copying premises, and he was doing it openly.
Could it be a case where you are absorbing, you know, unbeknownst to your consciously doing it, unbeknownst to you, you're absorbing these things, and then kind of like, you know, formulating a joke out of that thing that you didn't actively listen to? Could it be a case of that?
At that time, though, it's hard to believe that would have been the case at that time. First of all, at that time, during Mine and Mencia, I wasn't at the comedy clubs like they say.
What would
And-
incentivize like a young comic, say for instance, to say,
Oh, I was
"Hey, man,
hated. Listen, I was hated.
A lot of your material, I'm not saying all of it, right? And I don't even say most of it. You know what I mean? I think, you know, I can't, I don't know percentage wise.
Sure.
But a lot of your material was a little too similar to the ilk of Paul Mooney or, you know what I mean, Bill Hicks or, you know,
Sure.
the Cosby thing
I
was,
wasn't-
you know,
I
what I mean?
wasn't
Right. So my
inspired by
point,
those
and I know my
guys.
point
Hell
though being
yes.
is that, you know, to me, where there's smoke, there's fire. I don't know what the percentage of it is. Secondly, right, I was there, and I'm not saying what's wrong or right, but you would do a long time on stage, and you would bump
Yes.
a lot of these younger comics.
Yes.
Now, what Carlos just did is a common tactic or whatever you want to call it, but he does this throughout the podcast where he will ask a very simple question that I think everybody knows the answer to, or make a very obviously false statement to Bobby Lee's face, as if he expects them to just ignore it or not answer it. In this situation, Bobby starts to answer the questions, and then he completely cuts him off, interrupts, and then starts rambling about something else until the subject is changed.
And a lot of these young comics that you bumped are the big comics of today. You know what I mean?
Concur.
Yeah, why you're in the situation that you're in right now.
So why attack
So
me
what I'm-
about
so
my
what
name?
I'm
But why
saying-
attack me about my name then?
I personally have never heard.
See, here's what I need.
But I just want to let me just finish my point
Yeah.
though. My point is that you know, if I were you,
Yeah.
all right, I would do, you know, a blanket apology. You know what I mean?
I just
then-
don't know
and
who
move
to
on.
apologize
It's
to.
you know when Amy Schumer, right, apologized for stealing jokes, right? They
Right.
do a blanket apology. I'm so sorry that if I you know what I mean, I hurt comics, not anyone specifically. You know, I stole some jokes, and let's move on.
That's what was my next question, Ned. Was that
But she
Let's
did
move
that.
on.
But she did that on purpose.
say,
But it
"I'm
was
sorry,"
muddled.
all
The
across
problem is what he said. It was muddled, right? It wasn't just the material thing. It's you're a fake Mexican. Your name is Ned, right? You run the light. We don't like you because you bumped me. You're doing that's so. It didn't feel like none of those attacks felt like a genuine, authentic thing.
I see what you're saying.
It feels like
It felt
you
like for
don't
you.
like me. Like, why all this shit? Like, if it's material stuff, then let's talk about that.
Now, besides Carlos jumping from subject to subject, trying to very clearly avoid the questions, there is something that I noticed, and I think you might have noticed too if you saw the video version of the podcast, and that is that Carlos is actually wearing a Star Wars shirt that says, "I am your father." He is wearing it with the sweater on top that is open, and you can clearly see what the shirt says. Now, is there a chance that he did this on purpose in a way to send Bobby Lee a message that he is his comedy dad? Because Bobby Lee has said himself in the podcast that Carlos Mencia did help him out a lot, and he owes a lot to him. So There is no hiding that, but I just think it's maybe a weird coincidence.
I went on stage to confront Joe calling me Carlos Mencia because I wanted to know what it was all about. Here's what I mean by it gets muddled, and it's difficult. And all I want is for those guys to say, look, you did this, but because trust me, comedians that have shit stolen from them, we remember what jokes those are. I can tell you all the jokes that comedians have told after me that I told them first.
You could tell that Carlos Mencia was getting uncomfortable and getting very defensive. And here's the thing. Carlos made this such a personal issue back then with, Rogan, Bobby Lee, and Ari Shaffir, especially with Joe Rogan. He made it such a personal issue that it just wouldn't allow him to make a rational business decision. He could have just apologized, moved on, and continued to make a lot of money. But because of the relationships and the environment that he built around other comedians, younger comedians, where, he was the alpha dog, he was the one with the power, he was teaching people lessons, doing this, doing that. Well, when those people that he was doing wrong outed him and contributed to his downfall, his massive ego wouldn't allow him to apologize to those people. So because of that, apologizing now and even back then was completely out of the question. When he says that he paid a lot of money to people that advised him not to say anything, I don't believe that. I think that it was just him thinking there is no way that I'm going to apologize to these smaller comics who I treated so bad and are nothing compared to me. That's my opinion. And so he tries to make his personal issues with Joe Rogan and Ari Shaffir the focus of the conversation, hoping that it will take attention away from the actual issue, which is the plagiarism, the straight joke stealing.
Right. I remember those. Case in point, right? I'll give you an example. I had no problem with Ari Shaffir, right? No problem. Bobby calls me up and says, dude, Ari just beat the shit out of me. Do not put him on your show. And I immediately called my producers and said, is he booked on the show? Because if he's booked and you told him he's booked, we're not going to change it. But if he's not booked, I don't want you to book him. And they said, no, he's not booked. So I didn't put him on the show. After that, he starts saying I steal jokes. Problem with that is it gets muddled, right? Is he really pissed that he thinks I stole a joke from him? Or is it because I didn't put him on mine and
I think
Mencia?
my question is more like...
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I think my
So
question
for
is
me,
if 50...
that's hard.
And here, Kalila actually does a pretty good job at calling out Mencia when he starts going into one of his many nonsense rants about how he is looking for the people that he supposedly stole from, but he can't find them. It just doesn't make sense, and it's not true. Kalila, again, brings up a very good point, which is, hey, what about the power dynamic, the power differential between Carlos Mencia being one of the biggest comedians back then and a smaller, younger comedian that was probably afraid to call out Mencia for stealing one of his jokes. Obviously, there is a power dynamic, especially in the entertainment industry, between a superstar and somebody that is just starting in the business. He knows that, and so he attempts to change the subject. Well, he does change the subject by throwing Bobby Lee under the bus with the entire Ari Shaffir drama. And here's the thing. This is a story that Carlos Mencia tells as proof that there was a personal agenda behind the attacks and the accusations of joke stealing. And sure, you could argue that there was personal motivation from Ari Shaffir to accuse him of stealing his joke, after he had a fight with Bobby Lee and thinking that Bobby Lee had him kicked out of the Mind of Mencia, a big show back then. So because of that, you could argue that there was a personal motivation. However, there is video evidence of Carlos Mencia doing Ari Shaffir's wall joke almost word for word.
Here's this new thing. I don't know if you guys heard this. He wants to build a new wall all down the California-Mexico border, like a 12-foot high brick wall. It's like 3 feet deep, so no Mexicans get in. But I'm like, dude, Arnold, who do you think is going to build that wall?
I propose that we kick all the illegal aliens out of this country. Then we build a super fence so they can't get back in. And I went, who's going to build it?
Think about it. Carlos Mencia is essentially saying that, hey, Ari Shaffir wasn't mad that I stole his material when I was going to put him on my massively successful show. But when I didn't put him on my show, he called me a joke thief. regardless of what the motivation is, the fact is that there is clear evidence.
But I went up to those people individually
Ned,
and talked to them.
Ned, I know it's muddled. Okay?
Like with Ari,
but you're not,
I
you're
went
not,
up to him.
You're not canceled because you bumped people. Okay, you're not canceled because you changed your name, right? There's one case in point, which is the stealing, is the crux of the whole thing, right? So what I'm saying is
Right,
that
but
I know it's muddled.
It
right?
feels
But
like they threw a bunch of shit at the
I know,
wall.
I understand that, but all that
And that's
other
what
stuff
stuck.
I believe that,
is
by the
moot.
way.
I
And
believe
that's
that
what
as well,
stuck.
and that's what stuck. But the thing that is putting you in comedy prison is just the essence of the stealing. That's the real.
Yes.
Carlos once again goes into a wild rant, not making any sense. And Bobby Lee actually does a pretty good job bringing the conversation back, the focus back to the main point, the main reason why he got canceled, which was the joke stealing. Again, Carlos gets visibly uncomfortable, super uncomfortable, and proceeds to say one of the weirdest analogies I've ever heard. That analogy is just bizarre. I get it. He's trying to make a point about how he feels about joke stealing, but why even go there? I mean, why can't stealing be stealing? I mean, it's already bad. And here's the interesting thing. By him saying that and using that example, it just kind of shows how he thinks, and it's clear that he still doesn't want to address the power differential between him and the victims or the people that he stole from. And also, I don't think that's the best analogy to use, because he has not only been accused of it, but there is multiple video evidence, there is multiple witness accounts, and many, many stories on the internet that are from people that have actually seen him do that. So I don't think that's an analogy that you would want to use in the future.
Root of
Stealing is such a huge deal for me. It's like rape.
But I know. But
No, listen to me.
Yeah.
You need to understand this.
Yeah.
And I've never said this to anybody.
Okay.
And so whenever I've heard somebody say something about stealing, I've wanted to go up to him because to me, when you take a joke that somebody's really worked hard on to create it, because it's fucking hard to write a joke that gets an applause break. That's just hard to do. That's like raping somebody. And whenever I was accused of rape, I went up to that woman and said, "Hey man, somebody said I raped you last night. Is that what happened?" And she said, No, you didn't rape me. And what you're asking me to do is apologize to all the women I've raped. I want to, but can I meet these? Can I say I'm sorry to them in person? And every single person I call says no. Every single person I call says no. You never took shit from me. I just know you took shit, or I just know you said shit. You know what I'm saying?
Have you ever felt personally accosted? Was there ever a power dynamic? Because I know how much you revered Ned and how much you loved him.
Dude, when he posted that video.
Hey, I'm Bobby Lee. I've known Carlos Mencia about 11 years. I've been opening for him since the 90s. He's one of my best friends, and I've never seen him steal a joke.
Which, by the way, from my perspective, was just to show that, just to have him talk about the Ari Shaffir thing, right? Just to talk about that. Yeah. Just to talk about how, dude, he got so much shit that he called me up pretty much crying and said, "I got to take it down, dude. I can't deal with this." And from that moment on, I've never, ever, ever, ever said anything to him about it in a negative way.
This is where things get wild, because Bobby Lee is actually pushing very hard, calling him out, making things very uncomfortable for both of them. But sadly, Carlos Mencia continues to dig himself deeper into a hole by telling lies straight to Bobby Lee's face and to Kalila's face. Once again, props to Bobby Lee for actually pressing Carlos regardless of their past relationship and how close they were. And the truth is, you can only push so much before the conversation becomes unproductive, especially with Carlos Mencia, who is clearly not willing to concede an inch. Nothing.
Two truths at one time, Ned. Could there be two truths? You are, to me, somebody that I idolize. You're a superstar. You're funny. You're great. But could you also have made those mistakes, and could you apologize for those mistakes?
Of course, I'm ready to apologize to the people to the people that I did this to. Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. To the people that I did this to. I'm under it, no matter what.
Go ahead.
Can I say so? So, even here's the deal. It's like when.
And by the way, if I raped anybody, of course sorry. And I mean that as joke, like a joke thing.
Don't even put yourself in like
Yeah.
that like criminal
Except-
world, because it's like, yeah, to these kids maybe, or to whoever.
Yeah, but okay, look, financially
it's not
speaking,
that big.
it is a big deal. Do you know how many?
Yes,
do you know how
yes,
many
yes.
millions of dollars this cost me? Everybody, like the angry part of me wants to go to these people and say, I want all you motherfuckers to line up who say that I took something from you. Did I take millions of dollars from any of you motherfuckers? Because that's what you did to me. I got cancel cultured before cancel culture was a part. Also, they did something to me that comics up until then never done. We handled our shit together.
Now, something that's worth pointing out is that he actually believes that he did not take anything from comedians, but they took millions and millions of dollars from him. Now, this is a wild take for so many reasons that we'll get into, but this will actually come up towards the end of the podcast in a very dark way. He is basically trying to make himself the victim because, unlike young, broke comedians who have nothing to lose, he actually lost millions and millions of dollars because of them. Not because of him or his fault, but because of them. And that just makes me think that there is no sign of self-reflection or accountability whatsoever. And then here's another example of him doing that.
All I ever wanted was for you to show me that it's not just hate. Basically, I get that you hate me, but do you really hate me because I steal shit? Oh, I did steal your shit? What was the joke? Oh, sorry, man. I thought it's because my name is Ned, or I was pretending to be Mexican, or all these other attacks. So all I've ever wanted was a clarity in it. Like you're saying that I did that a lot, but there's only like 2 examples of me on the internet really doing that. And one of them is the wall joke and the other one is the Cosby joke. So for the fact that supposedly I was doing this all the time, there should be a load more people in jokes.
Yeah.
But
I'm not okay. I'm not saying.
But I get it. Listen,
I'm not saying. Listen,
this is my last hurrah, bro. I never saw it the way I saw it.
Now, to me, that just sounds like Carlos Mencia knew how the business worked, and he was taking way too much advantage of that. Think about it. Think about having a famous, powerful person do whatever he wants, and then having those people that he does stuff to just work it among themselves. Sounds like a horrible system, and it's clearly not how things work now. And what's coming up is probably one of the most uncomfortable moments of the entire podcast.
I see a path of redemption for you. Where it starts is, like you said, individually apologizing, but doing both. Doing the blanket statement anyways, whether you think it's genuine or not, how it lands on people is we can't control that.
Yeah, I don't have control over that. Like I said, I've called individuals to apologize. I've called them to say, sorry I bumped you, sorry I did that. You know what I mean? The Caparillos of the world.
You can tell Carlos was turning to Bobby, probably thinking, what the hell is going on? Because clearly Carlos Mencia was lying to their faces. He was saying that there was only 2 examples of him ever taking a joke, and the rest is just speculation or accusations, which it's clearly not true. I mean, we won't beat a dead horse, and I'm not going to show you all of them, but they are very easy to find online. There is way more than 2. There are also many comedians that have worked back then when Carlos was around and can confirm that he actually stole jokes. But again, looking at it from Bobby Lee's perspective, I don't know if calling him out then would be the best move, since he's clearly just denying everything and not really wanting to talk about it, which is unproductive. So instead, seeing that the situation was unfixable, they give him one last chance to make it right. Once again, Carlos goes into this weird monologue about how he is looking for the people that he has hurt, but he can't find anybody. Again, Carlos Mencia goes into this weird rant, which is clearly a lie and is very tough to watch, especially for anybody that is familiar with the situation, because he essentially is saying that he has looked for the people that he has hurt and he just can't find anyone. He tells people to reach out to him, that he will help them, but at this point, it's kind of meaningless.
Did Carlos did that for you when he stole your jokes?
Dude, I don't steal. I borrow without asking.
Anyway, the problem with Carlos is that you didn't want to do your good shit around him.
I know.
So it's like you ended up doing like crowd work or something, and the energy would just dump.
Yeah.
I mean, dude, I used to follow Carlos all the time, and
Yeah.
like people just don't want to get yelled at.
Yeah.
You know, here's the thing about
Okay.
Carlos, and I've talked about this on other things. And I know he's doing like a tour of apology. Anytime he wants to come on my podcast, I'd love to have a
can talk with him.
So after seeing that there was absolutely no sign that Carlos would ever apologize, Bobby Lee tried to end the conversation by saying a statement that was actually pretty fair.
This is how, because we have to close out because the ghost is up, and when that ghost is up, we close out. So this is how I genuinely feel about you. Okay, you obviously, I've said this. You're monumental help in my career, and I really thank you for all the things that you've done. Now, just take it. Don't.
Do you want me to tell you why I did it? So
no,
you
no.
really
Let me just finish my blanket statement. I really believe that you're one of the best performers I've ever seen. I believe that there are certain things that you didn't consciously or unconsciously do, but I think that there were some, elements of your act that were, too similar to other people's acts, and regardless if you're conscious about it or not, it is what it is. Like the Bill Cosby joke. That joke was Bill Cosby's. Bill Cosby himself, which is Bill Cosby's special, is like the White Album. It's like one of the most famous specials out there. You did a bit that was a little too similar to that bit,
right?
And it's for me unarguable. It's unarguable to me, by having you on, I was really nervous about it, and I just feel like, we're just at a point where it might be a situation where, it might be, unfixable, which is a sad thing.
Once again, Bobby Lee does a great job, and props to him for asking the questions that needed to be asked and saying the things that needed to be said, no matter how uncomfortable it was. Bobby Lee tells him that he did, in fact, steal material. A lot of his material was very similar to other people's, and that it is what it is, and Bobby Lee thinks that the situation is unfixable. He does show him some love by saying that he does think it's unfair that he's been in comedy jail for that long, compared to other comedians that have also been called out for joke stealing. But the thing is that having conversations like these, like that podcast in which there is no sign of self-reflection, self-accountability, no change whatsoever, doesn't help his situation at all.
I think you've been in prison for way too long.
That's why it's difficult, because it's coming from somewhere else.
Yeah.
As well. But if you loved me or you thought I was great and this tarnished it because you feel like I did it, I'm sorry that I made you go through that. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry that was the case.
Here, Carlos did no effort to even try and seem like he was remorseful for anything that happened. Obviously, at this point, Carlos wasn't going to apologize, but he did no effort to even appear to be sorry for the people that he treated badly in the past, that he actually admitted to bumping people, taking their stage time and all of that. He didn't even actually apologize for that. And when he did apologize, he did it with the most insane mental gymnastics I've ever seen. Essentially saying that he apologizes to the fans that were hurt when the accusations of joke stealing came out.
I'm really thankful that this shit happened to me and not some other comic, because I really believe that some other comic would have probably committed or done some really fucked up shit with what happened to me. I always understood why you did what you did and the perspective that you came from. I was never, ever hurt. That's not true. I was never offended, nor did I ever not understand why you chose to do what you do. My only issue with you was always, you've seen me create 20 minutes out of nothing more than once. Mm-hmm. It has bothered me, or sometimes, that you can see that and know that that's what I do, and then over here think that I literally lifted a bit from an iconic thing that never made sense to me. I don't understand why those two can exist in the same world in your head.
Could it be that he believes both, that you are an amazing
I do
writer?
believe both. I believe both.
Interesting.
Yeah, I believe both, and I believe both can exist.
Both can exist, but I've never held it against you.
Yeah,
you have always and will always be.
And again, the case of Carlos Mencia is just so interesting because although the evidence points a certain direction, Carlos continues to hold his ground and completely deny everything. He had another podcast with Patrick Bet David, which was almost as intense as this one. He also got called out, and it was pretty clear that he was lying. And but even with all that, it wasn't as good as the one with Bobby Lee, because obviously Bobby Lee was close to him. He was a huge part of his life and played a huge role in Carlos Mencia's downfall. People love a comeback story, and there's always a path to redemption. But the thing that makes me think that it will never happen with Carlos is him saying stuff like this.
Listen, I don't think you should air this, but I'm in a vulnerable place. You know that I have some family and some friends. I've stopped some of my good friends from doing some shit to people that talk shit about me. Even that was easy and not easy. Part of me wanted to say, just don't tell me.
Yeah.
Don't tell me what you're going to do. I don't want to know about it.
Yeah, yeah.
But if that's what you feel like you got to do, go do it.
Yeah, yeah.
You know how hard it is to pretend? Oh, man, it ain't shit. Dude, what are you talking about? Stop that. Nah, man, I'm good. I'm doing great. We're sold out this weekend. Blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? It's not. It is.
Well, let's end it on a lighter note. I'm glad that you and I both have pandemic bodies.
But I love you, dude.
I mean, look at our bodies. Look at our bodies.
But I just want you to understand that, like, that's real shit, dude. People don't see that. People don't know that.
Yeah.
People think, you know what I'm saying? So
anyway,
I was just being real with you, and then it goes away.
Yeah,
dude.
yeah,
and then
it
it's
got-
like
it got
gone.
dark.
It
got too dark for Papa.
No, don't get.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I told you, you might not want to air it. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. You must have an insane ego or be the biggest narcissist to think that you're actually the better person or the bigger person for not actually acting on your thoughts of like physically hurting somebody. It's just so weird. He also mentioned that he stopped a lot of his sketchy family members and friends from doing something horribly bad to the people that outed him, which is insane. To me, it's very interesting, and it shows the way he still thinks now, because you would think that he would follow that up with, and I feel bad about that now, and I regret it, and I'm no longer like that, but he didn't. He actually told Bobby Lee that he might not want to air it, and Bobby Lee was visibly uncomfortable. It was just weird, and it got very dark. But overall, you would think that a podcast with Joe Rogan would be the perfect place for Carlos Mencia to get a fresh restart, come clean, apologize, whatever. But by looking at how he acted with Bobby Lee, there is just no possibility that a podcast with Joe Rogan would ever happen. No way. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments below. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel to support. Dislike if you didn't like the video. But that is all we have for today. See ya.